Hi, I'm Jay, and today we're tying bucktails for lake trout. Stay tuned. So, good morning. Today I'm at the vise tying. I know a few months ago I did a jig that I use for lake trout here in the Finger Lakes here in central New York. I'm tying some more of those again today, a pattern that seemed to be pretty hot this past December. We've already gotten into ice fishing season. These are going to be jigs that I'm going to have in my box and available to me, ready for next fall. So around deer season into December, that time period before the ice really gets safe enough to walk on, is the time that we get a little bit itchy. We want to do some fishing, and we head to the Finger Lakes, fishing from shore for lake trout. But let's switch things around. And in the vise I have a ball head jig. It's on a Mustad hook, 32833. It's a 2X strong hook. Real nice hook, super sharp. Put this in nice and straight. Looks like I'm having a problem. There we go. So this pattern, the color combination I actually use in the Susquehanna, and it works really, really well for smallmouth bass. And we change up just a little bit. The thread that I'm using today is a size A fluorescent chartreuse. It's the what's it called? It's a Fuji, the Ultra Poly size A thread. We're going to begin by locking on some olive. So like I might have said before, I've done a couple videos on these specific jigs. Ball head jig, it's just the size that seems to work just perfect. You can get some fancier heads, but it just seems that the ball head is a nice profile. The fish in the Finger Lakes are feeding an awful lot on gobies, and that is what I believe that these are representing. Once I'm happy with my pinch, we're going to measure the length of the body past the bend of the hook for the length of the tail. Switch my grip and keep this nice and tight throughout the whole process. Now I actually lock that in with a couple wraps towards the bend of the hook, only because the 950 yard Fuji spools are slightly wider. So that creates a little bit extra drag in my bobbin as I'm trying to pull some thread out. I didn't want to try to pull some thread out and put pressure in a section of the wrap that I didn't want that heavier pressure. So I did make a couple wraps towards the head of the jig, and that's where I pulled out the thread that I was wrapping the collar with. Changed direction, went towards the bend of the hook, crossed back over to lock everything in place. At this point, just grab the pinch and give it a twist, putting the olive on what becomes the back of the jig. I'll have to go into greater detail on bobbin control and kind of explaining the how and when and why, as we wrap. As you wrap your collar, you also have to pull out more thread, or eventually you're going to be right up against the jig. But there's times to do that and times not to. So I have to be a little bit careful because my bobbin is not perfect to this spool. It's probably the best bobbin I have or could even find to hold this size spool. And really, to remedy it, if I was tying more of these, I would do the same thing I do with the 950 yard good rod spools, and that is to remove along the rim of the good rod spools is a thread keeper. I cut that right away so it doesn't interfere with the arms on my bobbin. And that's what I would have to do with this Fuji spool. I just haven't done it, and I have to remain conscious of that little extra just so I can keep a nice smooth wrap on my collar. So I'm going to lock this on. 3 wraps towards the bend of the hook, 3 wraps crossing back over towards the head, locking that into place. Now for this jig, I had to actually get a couple new packs, and this is the New Age Crinkle Flash, which has been my favorite all of 2023. I'm sure that this material has been around for a while. I kind of discovered it during the year, during 2023. But we have New Age Crinkle Flash. This is just the blue, and this is from Barlow's. But I really like this material. It's a nice thin Flashaboo, but it's also crinkled, and then the mylar, I guess, right? Is that the material? As the light hits this, I'm seeing gold, I'm seeing silver, I'm seeing blue, I'm seeing purple. So I really like the colors that come off the New Age Crinkle Flash. A little bit nicer than just using a plain Flashaboo that might just be a solid silver or a solid gold. Real pretty. I really like this material. And I'm going to take a pinch that's roughly 6 to 8 strands, no more than that. I don't need a big GABA flash on this. 6 to 8 strands on each side is perfect. So I loosen the jaws on my vise just so I can rotate it and get a better angle at placing this material right down the lateral line. So there's a couple wraps towards the bend of the hook, couple wraps back, locking that into place. And then I can rotate it the other direction. And again, 6 to 8 pieces. I try to be the same on each jig. I like it to be uniform. Again, lock this into place, right down the lateral line, a few wraps towards the bend of the hook, and then I can walk my thread back up to the head of the jig. And I'm trimming this just shy of the same length as the tail, so just a little bit shorter. And I can finish this off. There's a slight indent near the head, which I'm correcting by adding those extra wraps. It was only because I pulled some thread out and it did compress the hair just a little bit. I don't think it will affect because I did have that nice V shape, but it did compress on the olive side. But I think adding those extra wraps, trying to be gentle, not compressing it any further, corrected that. And I'm going to start my thread in the center of the collar, and again, just to compensate for the little bit difficulty I'm having with my bobbin. If I was sitting to tie a whole bunch of these, I would just take my knife and trim away that extra piece on the spool, which I'll show in a little bit greater detail after we're finished with this. So to whip this, I'm just taking a length of thread, I don't know, 18 inches or so, different color, size A. I can make a loop, place it underneath my last wrap. And I do need to make 1 or 2 wraps towards the bend of the hook, and then walk my thread back up to the head of the jig, back to the center, back to the head, and I'm just going to make a couple extra passes going back to about 1/4 and then back to the head of the jig. Just trying to take good care to make a nice, clean, neat collar. Sometimes I do have to do a couple extra wraps. That was a perfect example of a mistake. Was it something that went wrong? Yes and no. I guess it was something that went wrong, but it was the way I adapted to it, right? To finish the jig and not change the quality of our collar, the size of our collar. Oftentimes I've watched other tyers that when that happens, they make their collars they tend to make their collars a little bit longer, a little bit wider. We're trying to avoid that. We want a nice thin collar, not very wide, right? And we want the wraps to be uniform, be touching, nice smooth wraps back and forth. And to finish this off, we're going to add our lacquer-based head cement. And this jig, you know, it's mainly for lake trout, and that's mainly the reason why we spend a little bit extra money for the hook and get that 2x strong hook. But that 32833 hook is a nice fine wire. Let me turn my face off. And makes a really, really nice jig. The diameter is very similar to the regular jigs that we tie. And this color combination works great in the river for smallmouth bass. Pretty much for anything that's going to hit a jig this size. But I have a lot of success with this color with the smallmouth in the Susquehanna. So here we have it, that olive and fluorescent chartreuse with the crinkle mirror flash blue down the sides, and that fluorescent Fuji thread, a real pretty jig. And like I said, we did really well. This was a pattern that we used a lot in the Finger Lakes this past December, fishing for lake trout. But I think that's going to do it for us today. Before I forget, go ahead, check out the website, jworthhandtied.com. Add some comments down below. If you have any ideas that you want to see us do, different color combinations for this type of species and this type of jig, put those comments down below. Hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss any new content. And until next time, guys, keep tying and tight lines.